Hey everybody, it's Angel. You're watching ASMR Angel Reads. Hope you're having a good holiday. I'm going to try to post this before the end of the year, and then we can start the next book at the beginning of the year, which then the last part of Daggerspell. Chapter 6, Part F, I guess. Nevin was riding alone at the rear of the warband when the two wild folk came back, popping into manifestation on his horse's head and on his saddle peak. The obese yellow gnome was particularly pleased with himself, grinning from ear to ear, rubbing his fat little stomach. Nevin slowed his horse and dropped even further back out of earshot of the men. "Did you do what I told you to?" The yellow gnome nodded yes and stretched its mouth in a soundless peal of laughter. "And Rodri's safe?" This time the blue sprite nodded vigorously. She shaded her eyes with one hand and did a pantomime of someone peering and searching while her face registered sheer frustration. "And you got the horses?" They both nodded. "Splendid, splendid. You have my thanks, and you come tell me if Rodri's in danger again." They disappeared in a swirl of breeze. As Nevin rode back up to join the others, he allowed himself a smile for the thought of Rice's men walking the whole 15 miles back to Aberwen in soft riding boots. "It's a good thing I decided to scry Rodri out," he thought to himself. "Cursed Rice and his murdering bastards all." "The warband must have reached your cousin's dun by now," Daniel remarked. "Just so," Lovian said. "It was sensible of Cullen to think of taking the men away. At least Rodri's left me a good man to captain the band." With a sigh, Lovian sat up on the bed and ran her hands through her tangled hair. She had wept enough for one day in spite of the pain she felt over Rodri's exile. She had to pick up the broken pieces of her plans and make new ones. Oh, gosh, I forgot. Last section, Rodri got put in exile, so. "Dan, would you get a servant to fetch me hot water?" Lovian said. "I'll have a wash and dress now. I must have a word with the Gorbert." "So soon? Is my lady sure that's wise?" "Not wise at all, but necessary." Yet in the end Rice came to her. Lovian had just finished dressing when a page appeared to ask if she would receive the Gorbert. Lovian took a place by the window and drew herself up to full height as Rice came in. He looked so timid that Lovian suddenly remembered that there was something he was very badly wanted from her. "Mother, my apologies. Truly, I never meant to send Rodri away or to hang him either. I was honestly glad when his captain reminded me of my promise. Don't you see, after he stood there and defied me in open Malover, what could I do? Knuckle under and be shamed in every man's eyes?" Lovian wished that she could believe him. In time, perhaps, she would be able to make herself believe him. "Mother, please, I'd already shamed myself once by admitting my fault there in the Malover. I have no doubt that his grace perceived his choice that way. I have hopes that he will see a better choice at a future sometime. I suppose you want me to recall him? Does his grace truly have to ask me that?" With a toss of his head, Rice began pacing back and forth. Lovian considered refusing to make him a marriage for Donilla unless Rice recalled his brother, but she knew him too well. In angry pride he would refuse the bargain, and then Donilla would suffer for her husband's fault. "I wish to leave your court on the morrow," Lovian said. "If Donilla's going to ride with us, you'll have to drink the bitter ale and put her to the side. It's only hurting both of you by delaying it anyway." "My thanks." Rice turned to her in honest relief. "I was afraid that you'd—" He could not quite bring himself to finish. She let the silence build until he looked down, shamed by her generosity. "Mother, please, won't you accept my apology?" "Mother, never call me that again." Rice flinched as she slapped him. She paused just long enough for him to feel the sting. Not at least until Rodri's back home. Rice started to speak, then turned and strode out, slamming the door so hard that the silver oddments on the mantel rattled. Lovian allowed herself a small smile. I'm a warrior's wife and a warrior's daughter, and the war, your grace, has just begun. The sun was low in the sky when Rodri came to the stone slab marking the border between the Gorberthan and Aberwin of Aberdod. He paused his horse and contemplated the dragon carved on the west side and the hippogriff rampant carved on the east, then rode the last few feet across. For all the good it was going to do him, he was safe. Rice's men would never risk starting a war by pursuing him into another Gorbert's ran and thus usurping the Gorbert's jurisdiction. As the evening wind picked up from the sea, he shivered and pulled his plain blue cloak around his shoulders. His stomach was growling and nodding. He hadn't eaten since the ill-fated feast the night before. A few more miles brought him to the big farming village and the Grey Goat Tavern, a thatched round house with a stable out and back. As he dismounted, the taverner came out, a bulky blob of a man who reeked of garlic. He looked Rodri over with a shrewd eye for the blazons on his shirt and worn spot on his belt where the scabbard should have hung. I'll wager you got into a bit of trouble with the captain of your war band. What's it to you? Not, and a silver dagger in your belt, is there? Who pledged you to do that? Cullen of Claremore. Oh ho! The tavern gave him a wide grin, revealing stubs of front teeth. Then come in and welcome. You can work around the place like to earn your keep while you figure out what you're going to do next. Here, lad, have you been flogged? My wife can give you a poultice or somewhat for your back. I haven't, but my thanks. Good, good. At least your lord was merciful, man, eh? Well, put your horse in the stables. My name's Gad, and mine's Rodri. Just in time, he stopped himself from calling himself Lord Rodri Mailweed. That he only had part of his name left gave him a cold feeling, but at the same time he was relieved that Gad's easy assumption that he was a disgraced writer outside of Rice's Gorberthan, no one but the noble lords would know who he was, and once he left Eldid, a few of them would recognize him either. Without his name and his plaid, he would be only another silver dagger. Apparently Gad had higher opinion of horses than he did humans, because while the stable was clean and well tended, in the tavern room the battered tables were slick with grease and straw on the floor smelled like kennel bedding. The stew, however, that Gad put in front of Rodri was thick with meat and turnips, and the bread that went with it was freshly baked. Rodri gobbled while Gad brought him a tankard of dark ale and pointed out where the open barrel stood. Dip out what you want. No doubt you'll be drinking yourself blind tonight. Just do your puking out in the stable yard. Yet Rodri stayed reasonably sober. As the place filled up with local farmers and their wives, he saw them watching him with hungry curiosity of those whom a fallen tree is a village event. Even though Gad told everyone to leave him alone, Rodri felt as vulnerable as if he were walking naked through the city streets. He nursed a couple of tankards and huddled by the warmth of the hearth while he wondered if Cullen truly would be able to get him some coin and a sword. Without a weapon he couldn't fight, silver dagger or no. The irony struck him hard. Before he'd been a great lord able to load Cullen with honors. Now, if he stayed alive, it would only be because Cullen had befriended him. Out on the long road, Cullen's name meant as much as Mailweed did in the world he invocably left behind. Rodri had no hope at all that Rice would ever recall him. The more their mother pressured him, the more stubborn he would become. Rodri was sure of it, and with good reason. If he'd been the Gorbert and Rice the exile, he never would have relented. Locked in their hatred, he and Rice shared a core where they were twins, not merely brothers, and when they reached their core, they understood each other better than anyone else in the world could ever do. No matter how much his kin schemed and begged, Rodri would live and die a silver dagger. He knew it there in the core. Idly he pulled the dagger from his belt to look at it, Colin's device. At his touch the blade ran with silvery light. He sheathed it fast and glanced around, but fortunately no one noticed. "You're worse than just an exile," Rodri told himself. "You're a half-elf, too." All at once he felt dizzy, just from seeing that he no longer fit anywhere in this world. Not among the West folk, not among men, a half-breed with no clan, no rank, no place to call home. Nothing but a silver dagger to give him the identity he'd always taken for granted. He laid his hand on his dagger hilt and understood why, scum of the kingdom that they were, silver daggers clung to their name and their band. He got up and dipped himself out another tankard, drank it fast, and went out to the hayloft over the stable. He had never wanted anything as much as he wanted simply to go to sleep and wipe the world away. Yet he had a restless night of it because he was cold. He had no blankets. He was too proud to ask Gad for some, and the chill autumn night had driven away the false summer warmth of the day. He wrapped himself in his cloak, burrowed into the straw like a dog in a kennel, but every time he drowsed off, he would wake shivering. Finally, he sat up to ease the cramps in his back and wondered if he could stand the stink of his saddle blanket. It was small, but it would be something. Then he heard a horse trotting into the stable yard. Since it was highly unusual for anyone to travel at night, he hoped that this traveler was Colin's messenger sent to him as fast as possible to make sure Rice never knew. His mind mostly on warm blankets, Roderick climbed down the ladder and hurried out into the moonlight. He recognized the horse before the rider, who was just dismounting. Sunrise tossed a weary head and nickered in greeting. "There you are, my love," Jill said. "I've got your sword. Dot and Lord Sligan bribed the guards, and we nipped it out right under the stinking brother's nose." In sheer disbelief, Rodri stood stock still. He was sure that he was having a desperate dream and nothing more, until Jill walked over and laid her hands on his chest. They were solid and warm. "Oh, here, did you think I'd let you go into exile and not follow?" "I did. Forgive me. You'd even leave your father for me?" "I would." She went tense, and he could hear her tears under her words. "But it's hard. I won't lie and say otherwise. But I had to go, and oh ye gods, Rado, I love you so much." Rodri threw his arms around her and kissed her. Tight in each other's arms, they laughed and wept in turns until the grumbling Gad came out to see who was making all the noise in the stable yard. Since Lord Perrin, the cousin who was sheltered Lovian's men, paid direct fealty to the Gorbert Rice, there was no doubt that it was awkward for him to have the Ku Klux warband under his roof. Just at dawn, Colin woke the men, got them fed, and told them to start their saddling their horses so that they could meet the lady out on the road and spare Perrin a further sight of them. He was just finishing with his own horse when the worried-looking Nevin jogged over to him. "Cullen, where's Jill? I can't find her anywhere." "No doubt she rode out last night to follow her Rodri." Nevin froze, staring at him open-mouthed. "You let her go?" the old man said at last. "And what choice did I have? She could have sneaked off like a thief, but she paid me the honor of coming to me and telling me the truth." Afraid that he would weep, he busied himself with adjusting the bridle, which needed no adjustments. "Besides, the lad needs her. He's never ridden anywhere without a pack of servants. Do you think he could even tell green wood from dry if he wanted a fire?" "Doubtless not, truly. You know, my friend, you're a cursed strong man." "I'm not, just one who knows enough to send his weakness far away from him." When he risked a look, he found the old man smiling in a friendly kind of disbelief. He was surprised at how much having Nevin's honor meant to him. "I've had one of the lads ready your horse. We'll be riding soon." "My thanks, but would you mind if I rode after Jill? I want to say my farewells to her." Mind? Not in the least, and besides, it's not fair for me to say any more what she does or doesn't do. Cullen escorted Nevin down to the gates and held the bridle of the horse while the old man swung into the saddle. Tell Lady Lovan that I'll return to Dungorbert soon, Nevin said. If not else, I have to claim my mule and my herbs. Done then. I look forward to seeing you there. Will you now? Nevin shot him another smile. And I'll look forward to seeing you. Do you have any message for your silver dagger of a daughter? Not. I told her I loved her last night. There's not else to be said. Cullen leaned back against the wall and watched him ride off into the brightening dawn. He felt himself trembling like a beggar in the snow. Jill, oh ye gods, Jill, Jill, Jill. Yet now she would never learn of his shame, never have to know that he'd been tempted to dishonor them both. Cullen was smiling as he walked back into the ward where his men were waiting for him. Since Nevin often stayed in the Grey Goat when he was doctoring the local farmers, Gad knew him well. When he rode up that evening, Gad waddled out all smiles and bows to take his horse from him. What, no mule? You haven't given up Erbcraft, have you? I haven't. I'm just here to look for someone. A young silver dagger and Cullen of Caremore's lass. Which way did they ride when they left? Left? Ha! They've been up in the hayloft all day, they have. Oh, a young lad's a man just doesn't have that kind of stamina when he gets in years. Gad shook his head mournfully. It's the cursed good thing that custom's slow this time of year. I see your point truly. Well, I'll wait in the tavern until they get hungry enough to come down. Nevin was just settling down to a bowl of Gad's good stew when Jill walked in to the smoky firelight of the tavern. He tense as a hunted deer, she paused just inside the door and watched him warily. Have you come to fetch me back? You'll have to enscroll me or such like to do it. Maybe Rodri's an exile and a dishonored man, but I'll follow him anywhere. It stabbed like a fire, remembering the time when she'd said those same words about Prince Galron, but she was no longer Bragawin, and Nevin reminded himself and cursed if you're going to play Garrett. I know you would, child, and it's your choice. I only wanted to bid you farewell, but would it ache your heart if our roads crossed again? I might find myself wandering the same way you wander at times. Ache my heart? What? Never. Here, what would ache my heart would be to never see you again. And so she ran to him and hugged him. For a moment he stood as stiff as a sword blade with surprise, then he gave her a godfatherly pat on the head. Then we'll meet again, I promise you that. Splendid. Jill spoke so sincerely that Nevin felt his hope flare. She liked him, she trusted him, and someday he would make her see where her true weird lay. After all, by following Rodri, she set herself up for the Dwemer. No longer would she be caught and buried by the intrigue of a powerful court, and the dangers of an unsettled life would keep her latent talents alive. He thought of broaching the subject of her Dwemer talent then and there, but the time was still unripe. She would only react with panic this soon after having seen Dwemer gone mad and turned to evil ends. He would have to wait, but by letting her go, he was not losing her but keeping her. And they were sitting back down at Nevin's table when Rodri came in. With his sword at his side, he strode over as if he were still a lord, but Nevin could see the change in his eyes, so haunted and weary that he seemed to have aged several years. I think I owe you my life, Rodri said. Because of Rice's men yesterday, you mean? Well, indeed, I had a hand in that, huh? No doubt your brother would have wept and wrung his hands when your body was found, at least in public. No doubt, the piss-poor drunken sot, Rodri said, sat down next to Jill. Well, good sir, it looks like Eldred will have to work out her weird with no help from me. Perhaps so. We'll have to see what the gods have in store. While they ate, mostly in silence, Nevin pondered what the great ones might want done. now that the lad had been sent away from the province he was born to. He also wondered whether Rodri were in danger. Now that he no longer held political power, he might well be of no further interest to the Dark Dwemer, but the hope seemed too idle of one. Yet, as he considered the problem, not one single Dwemer warning came to him, only the generalized and normal fear of silver daggers, after all, often died young in battle. The lack of warning made it plain that, at least for now, Rodri was in no danger from the masters of the black craft. He would be safe, then, for Nevin to let him go on their way and keep watch from a distance while he tried to influence Rice to recall the exile. You know, Nevin, Rodri finally said, I'm cursed lucky that Jill loves me so much, or I'd have died soon enough on the long road. Oh, hogwash, Jill broke in. You're not a half-wit. You would have learned how to fend for yourself. That's not what I mean, Rodri's voice went cold and flat. In every battle I rode, I would have volunteered for the point of charge or riding into the worst mob. There's more than one way for a man to end his exile. It was a confession quietly said. Jill grabbed his arm. But now, he went on, not when I've got you to live for. Jill flung her arms around his neck and kissed him. Nevin sighed aloud at the irony of it, that by keeping Rodri alive, Jill was already serving the Dwemer, though she knew it not. The next morning, Jill woke just at dawn and found Rodri's arms tight around her. Gray light filtered in through the cracks of the stable walls, and the sound of the rain drummed on the roof. She rested her hand on Rodri's chest and listened to the rain song mingling with the steady breathing, while she smiled at herself for finding Gad's hayloft more to her taste than her father's bed back in the Dungorbert. When she thought of Cullen, she had to close her eyes tight to force back the tears. I'm sorry, she thought, but you know I had to go. At least she left him in a safe place where he'd never have to sleep in the rain again, no matter what happened to her. Bitterly, she wondered if he would ever see him again, but she had to make her choice, and she would follow Rodri forever if the gods allowed. And the gods could do what they wanted, she decided. She always lived a single day at a time, simply because she never had any choice but to live that way. The long road stretches into mist, Cullen always said, and no one can see the end of it. She had Rodri and her freedom to ride, and then she fell back to sleep. She decided that they would do splendidly for now. Okay, that is the end of Book 1, Daggerspell. After the new year, I will start the next book. Thanks for watching. Bye.